I've created this video to show you how to easily remove your transfer case. First thing I always do, chock my wheels. Parking brakes on, and I'm not going to be jacking the car up. I just do this for additional safety precautions. I have jack stands set up in two positions. One here on the back of the transfer case, and another in front of the skid plate supporting the transmission. So when we drop this skid plate, the transfer case and the transmission are going to want to drop as well, because the skid plate is supporting all of that weight. I'm starting with the torque stud first, and this is a 14 millimeter. You also have to get the wrench or a socket on the top here, also 14 millimeter, because that'll just spin. Torque stud's off. Make sure that you don't lose your washers for the torque stud. There's a series of washers that go on there, and remember what order you've taken them off. I have two on the bottom, and I believe there's one on top. Now I'm going to remove these two nuts from the transmission mount. This is a 15 millimeter socket. Now we're good to remove the skid plate bolts here, here, and here, and the three on the other side. I'm going to put a clamp on here to support the weight a little bit, just to make it a little bit easier to take it down. Depending on what kind of transfer case drop you have, or if you don't have a transfer case drop, your bolt heads might be a little bit different. Mine are a 5/16 hex wrench or Allen key. And if your Jeep has a lot of rust in this area, you have to be very careful removing these bolts, because the nuts that are welded inside of the frame, I've seen them break loose, and then the job becomes a lot more difficult. Trying to bring these out evenly, going a little bit at a time. All right, so these bolts are loose, but they're not all the way out. Now I'm going to switch over to the other side and drop those down a little bit. All right, it looks like the weight of the transmission and the transfer case are now fully supported by the jacks, the jack stands. You can see I have this movement here. So I'm going to finish backing out these bolts on this side. I want to support this. These clamps so it doesn't drop completely. I'm going to move over to the other side. Okay, should come down. And there we go. I'll release it from the other side. Next, we're going to be removing the front and the rear drive shafts. Let's start by removing these nuts, and then I'm going to tie off drive shaft over here to the frame rail. I'm going to start by removing these bolts that hold on the clamps for the U-joint on the drive shaft. It's an 8 millimeter socket. It's a good idea to have any kind of tape ready. When you drop this drive shaft, you're going to want to tape up the bearing caps on the U-joint. Make sure that they don't fall out, because there's lots of needle bearings in there that you don't want to lose. I gotta move the camera, get this out. All right, so the front shaft's out. I have the bearing caps taped up. Now I'm just gonna hang this from the rail with a bungee. Keep it up out of the way. And I'm gonna do the same for the rear drive shaft. Before I remove this drive shaft, I'm gonna make a mark so I know where it aligns when I put it back in. Before I pull this shaft all the way out, I'm going to get a drip pan just in case I lose any fluid from the transfer case. Next thing you're going to want to do is disconnect your connections on the transfer case. Right here in the center, this square plug, your vacuum plug, that pulls right off. You want to disconnect your shift linkage. Also just pops right off with a screwdriver. You have a vent hose that's on the top, and then you have your plug for your speedometer over here on this side. So let's start unplugging these. That just pulls right off. This vacuum line should also pull right off. There's a breather line right here. There we go. And now we'll have to disconnect our shift linkage. There we go. Okay, so all of our connections on the transfer case are off. Now we're ready to unbolt it. I believe there is a total of 6. There's one here, up top, and 3 on the other side. Now this one here is a little bit difficult to get to without removing this mounting plate. I'm going to remove this mounting plate next. There's 4 bolts on the bottom, I believe are 16 millimeter. Sorry for bumping that. Keep bumping the camera. Now this is also supporting the exhaust. It's an exhaust hanger on here. So just be aware of that. All right, I pulled that bracket off the exhaust hanger right here. I thought it was going to be difficult, but it slid right off. I just had to wiggle it back and forth. Now I have easy access to these bolts that I showed you earlier, and once those are removed, the transfer case will come right out.